Welcome to a new episode of Education Exchange, ladies and gentlemen of Iowa City Community School Districts and the surrounding districts too. It's our honor at Public Access TV and on behalf of the education leadership to welcome one of the main leaders and main visionaries of the team that leads our school, Mr. Bachway.
Thank you.
Mr. Bachway, this is your second time on our show. Last time was about 8 months ago, and we, at that time, had a very different school district than the one we have today.
Right.
There are a lot of changes and a lot of updates thanks to the efforts of the team of leadership under the guidance of Steve Merrily and his associates. And with your contribution to this team, I think the district has won a big asset.
Thank you.
And we would like to give you credit for a lot of achievement that happened. And I would like you to tell our viewers what happened since you were here last time.
Well, basically, we talked a little bit about the equity plan at the last meeting. And so that was in its beginning, basically, in its creation. And so one of my mandates as far as getting the job was, working on a comprehensive equity plan for the entire school district. And so since then, really trying to do a good job working with the team, not only engaging the community about the equity plan, whether that be just multiple constituent groups within the community, but also just kind of public interaction to get an understanding of what the equity plan is and also talk about it from just an overall understanding as far as what we want to achieve here in the school district as far as equity is concerned. And so in the meantime, the board has basically worked towards three strategic goals. The two strategic goals focused on reading and math by a certain proficiency with a focus on closing the achievement gap. The last goal talks about the looking at the entire child and the educational experiences of a child, and so making sure that we are cultivating a very culturally inclusive environment for all of our kids in the Iowa City Community School District. And so under that third goal, we really placed that as kind of the goal for the school district to move forward with the equity plan. And so we basically have from that 4 objectives. The first objective is to diversify our staff, and so that will happen through attrition. That will happen from individuals retiring or moving on to different districts. And so we'll have a new influx of diversity that comes in a variety of different forms, not just in the form of color. The other part was looking at how we can reduce the disproportionality in a lot of different areas. And so one of the things we focused on is kind of a revamped training about cultural competency. We do focus a little bit more on race, but that's just because of what the data has been showing. But again, it's about all cultural competency and how if we are culturally competent, we can really do a better job as far as closing that achievement gap. The third thing that we talked about is doing a better job as far as really enriching the multicultural and gender fair education and curriculum that we have for our students. We do a wonderful job at the Iowa City Community School District, but we always are looking to improve and do a lot better. And so what can we do to facilitate and have a greater discussion and meeting behind what that will look like? And so it's very important. And then last but not least is, it's not necessarily last because it's not as important, it's just community engagement. And so how do we get our parents involved? And I know that's a question that individuals are asking nationally, and so I by no means think that we have the answer, but I think we can look at different ways and be creative from a different standpoint and have a different lens when we're engaging our parents to figure out ways to bring them into school. And so we're trying a couple of pilots. We're trying to get different communities in different places, whether that be looking at just an opportunity to be within the school setting, so you can work with your groups and families through tutoring or whatever the case may be. Or one of the ideas is we're trying to figure out ways to get parents families in to use our computer labs. Instead of going all the way down to a library, maybe we can provide families access so they can have a positive experience with the school and then grow from that experience moving forward and just have a better relationship. And that's what we're looking for. And so those are the 4 objectives. And off the top of my head, I can't go through the different things that we're working on, but I can share some of those accomplishments. Just within staffing, we've seen an increase within our hiring practices, which has been really just focusing on what we're doing with our affirmative action plan and putting some things in place that I think have helped provide more emphasis, but not change necessarily our hiring standards or anything along those lines. We want the best and the brightest to be employed at the Iowa City Community School District, and that standard will never change. Beyond that, we do have 2 African American principals that have now come on board. One is Dr. Boyd over at Southeast. I know she's been on the program before. She's an outstanding individual. And then we have Laura Cottrell, who's an outstanding individual as well at Northwest Junior High. Beyond the 2 staff of color that were hired, I thought we had an amazing year with the multitude of staff that we had. We have a new principal at Lucas, Ken Turnus. We had a new principal at Horseman, Julie. We had a lot of different staff come into the school district that not only have a great enthusiasm to them or are going to be great leaders, but also have a mindset about cultural competency and how we can do that to move the needle forward.
Mr. Botchway, I would like you to explain to our audience who are not part of the education system and who are not familiar with the jargon that we use among ourselves as educators and leadership of education. The definition of cultural competency, what does it mean in a very simple way that lay people can just understand it?
Well, I mean, it's basically talking about awareness of backgrounds. We try to, I'm going to talk about it from 2 different contexts because I do think you need to have an understanding of one's culture and group that they may be a member of. But we want to go deeper than that. We don't want to paint with such a big brush. And so we want to make sure that we're having a conversation about what each kid brings to the table. And so while we do think cultural competency is an aspect of looking at one's own group and a member of the group that they may be in, we also want to still delve deeper in asking questions as far as what is specific about this individual child, what do they bring to the classroom, what their strengths do they bring to the classroom so we can really accentuate on those strengths and move forward. Another part that I do want to kind of make mention to is equity as well. And so a lot of times we get equity and equality and use them interchangeably, which is problematic. And so the way I always talk about it is equity is a process and equality is the outcome. And so educational equity for the school district.
It's a very nice way to put it. Yeah. And an easy way to comprehend.
Exactly. And so educational equity for the school district is applying additional or different resources to kids so they can exceed grade level standards. And so one of the wonderful things that I wish I had a poster of was a picture where you see a kid. We want everyone to reach a goal. We want everybody to achieve and excel, but we know that's going to happen in different ways. And so one individual might need additional resources, teacher time, more time on a test than somebody else. And so that's what equity means. We want to get everybody to the same goal, but you may need additional or different resources to get to that particular goal. And so it's really looking at meeting learners where they're at and then pulling them forward.
Can you address some of the challenges that you are confronted with in trying to execute your plan or to put your vision into action?
I think across the board, our district team is looking at a mindset shift. Education is something that has been somewhat stagnant for years in how we view students and how we talk about students, whatever the case may be. And so, there's been different things that we're trying to look at to change the conversation or have a different perspective. And that's why cultural competency, that's why equity is so important, because it's not necessarily doing something new, but it could be doing something in a different way. And I say that in the sense of, I always ask people, one of one of my things is after you've done our first cultural competency training, you now wear an equity lens or a cultural competence lens or a cultural lens more specifically. And with that lens, you're going to ask different questions. Not to say that you were asking the wrong questions before, not to say that you weren't asking questions before, but I want you to ask different questions. So why do you have this learner that's different than this learner? Does it have anything to do with bias that may come in, implicit bias that may come involved? Is there anything else going on? Have you put together an environment that's a very culturally relevant environment for that student? Does the student feel welcome? These are all things that, we as adults look at when we may pick a particular job. We look at climate, we look at culture, how we succeed in that particular job. But as kids, they don't necessarily have the ability to advocate for that. And so we need to make an environment that is culturally enriched, not only for our students of color, but also for our white students as well. The biggest thing that I want people to understand about what I mean about talking about culturally inclusive classrooms is, our mission statement talks about us being, making our students leaders, and not just leaders within the Iowa City community, but global leaders. And without necessarily a cultural understanding or a cultural inclusive understanding, we're going to put our student leaders at a disadvantage when they leave Iowa City. And obviously I want them to stay. I don't want a brain drain to leave. But at the end of the day, I do want the next president to have a great cultural understanding about the many different cultures of United States of America, or I want a doctor to have a cultural understanding, or a lawyer to have a cultural understanding, or another teacher to have a cultural understanding. And so as we ask these of our students to be amazing leaders, we have to really put together an environment that's culturally inclusive and culturally responsive as well, to make sure that our leaders are thinking and engaging in that way.
It is just a coincidence that we are meeting today with you, Mr. Botchway, few hours after the President of the United States met with a group of teachers at the White House. And one of the very important observations about this meeting, that all the details will be published tomorrow morning in the papers and on the air, is the view of our president about testing. And I have never agreed with everything the president does. But today I uploaded his views about that we are over-testing our students. And these tests sometimes doesn't make any sense except more profits to certain big corporations that sell the tests. I understand that you are one of the leaders of this community school district. And testing has been very important for the Department of Education, the federal government, and they are pushing it. And I know that the president will have very difficult time trying to sell his idea to other people. But without, cornering you or asking you to say something that's not really very politically correct, I would like you to tell me your own views about what I'm going to say now. That testing is one of the main problems that beats equity, because certain cultures are one of the main pillars of these cultures is the acceptance of the idea of testing. And other cultures, kids don't do well in tests, period. And they fail. And they are inferior. They are treated as unable, or their aptitude is less. So in this, or by this, definitely there are the majority of the population of the United States are people who are used how to take tests. They know how to take tests. But there are a lot of minority kids don't do that. And I really am very encouraged by what the president said today, because it's a wake-up call to our education system. Here is a very important sensitive part here. And the president mentioned numbers. He said some of our kids are exposed to 112 tests every single year. And that's, to some parts of our population, is unfair. So I just want to know, do you foresee any maybe future approach to the idea of testing as part of the equity policy or strategy?
You know, as we look at reducing disproportionality within the educational achievement, obviously I think that's something we can look at. You know, there is testing that is mandated that we have to go through. And I do think there has to be a part of where we look at how we can give kids the skills to achieve and do well in testing. I don't want to not necessarily give skills to do that, because we also want to make sure that our kids can achieve in different settings. But to your point, you know, one of the things that is kind of talked about or consistently talked about is, you know, whether or not the testing gives us information that we can act on. And so one of the things that we've consistently looked at or tried to, I feel like, create or put some type of our minds around is how can we use testing in a way that doesn't hinder student learning, that doesn't cause problematic situations, but does give us the ability to know whether or not our students are learning. And tests look differently in different ways. I mean, obviously you're talking about some of the federal tests and state mandated tests that happen, but you know, at times you can get, you know, a quick test.
Especially standardized testing.
Especially standardized tests. But at times you can get a quick test just simply from, you know, asking a show of hands to individuals understand the lesson that was taught yesterday. I mean, there's different forms of testing, and so I think that, you know, as we look at these things, we can
do more studies in the area.
We can do more studies and find out what we can do. I mean, it's a tough question because, you know, I don't want to limit our kids from having a skill or understanding how to test, because it's a social skill. It's something that, you know, when they go into a room and they're looking for a position and they're given a test on their aptitude, I mean, it happens. And so we want to make sure that we're giving kids the opportunity to learn how to do those particular tests. But I also agree with your point to a certain extent, because I think that, you know, are the tests bearing any fruit? I mean, are these tests important for progressing the educational achievement of a child? I mean, those are the questions that I think we're consistently asking at the district, and looking at different ways we can combat or even work through some of the federally state mandated things.
Of course, you know, I know that I'm asking difficult questions. But what I'm asking you, I am thinking loudly too. Mm-hmm. A parent who has known that I'm going to have the honor of meeting you today told me, well, you have a chance to ask Mr. Patchway tomorrow this question. And I said, what's your question? And he said, ask him why there are more minority students in the transition programs, in the at-risk programs, at Tate, than any other majority of population. Why it is like that?
That's a great question. I mean, that's one of the things that the equity plan is trying to address. When we have the disproportionality within our system, we want to see what are we doing systemically to, I wouldn't say push, but to send kids in the direction of transitional programs or at Tate High School. You know, I do want to make sure that we are talking from the same basis, from the standpoint of, you know, everybody learns differently. And so I don't want to paint Tate in a way that that makes it seem like it's not a great school. No. And I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying that I want to make sure as I'm talking about this, because I believe Tate, you know, is a great school, and it speaks to different learners. I mean, if I was back in the City High or West High setting, you know, a lot of the things that kids are asked to do now compared to when I was asked to go to school are vastly different. And the fast pace that they have to go through class to class, get prepared, whatever the case may be, is you know, synonymous with some of the stuff I had to do at law school. And so because of that, you know, individuals learn differently. But as far as understanding what we can do to change that, that's one of the questions that was written to the plan, because we wanted to kind of ascertain what we can do differently and what questions we can ask, because it's an important part. And I don't necessarily have the answer for that yet, and I'm hoping to glean the answer as we're looking at the data, as we're working with the equity committee, the school board, and also the team members at the ESC, but also the different administrators as well. What can we do differently? What can we put in place to help learners? One of the things that is part of our courageous equity training or leadership training that we're all going through as administrators is talking about if it's predictable, it's preventable. And so if we know these numbers are occurring, they're predictable numbers, what can we do to prevent that? And so I'm an open book. I'm willing to listen to anybody who can share with information. And we're meeting and working, collaborating with not only the university, but also amongst ourselves to really kind of handle and work with that problem. But, it's something year one that is still a quagmire of mine, so we want to move forward and try to figure out what we can do and move forward together.
Well, no doubt that I am delighted that you have clarified to the viewers that TATE and the transition program are not at all less efficient than any of the other high schools or junior high schools. But unfortunately, although I belong to the alternative education, I'm a very supportive guy. I taught there. All my heart is there. And I know very well that we teachers there and principals, leadership are doing their best. And but again, it is a problem of the stereotype and unfortunately the impression that those are places for the not so good kids.
Right.
And it's a wrong impression, definitely. Those places are the only places in the district that teach one-on-one directly. The only places where the kid can talk to the teacher with their first name. I mean, it's a beautiful environment, and that's why it's a chance to invite people who misunderstand that as a punishment. It's not a punitive thing.
Right.
Absolutely. It's, as you explained, it's a different style of learning.
Well, and I don't want to let us off the hook either. There are some concerns, and from those concerns, I want to make sure that, bias isn't playing a role.
Right.
That's why we do that's what we're doing implicit bias training. That's why we're talking with our leadership about what kind of equity goals, specific equity goals we can have with our buildings to make sure that, our rigor in the classroom is very engaged, to make sure our curriculum is relevant to all learners. And so those are things that we're working through. So I don't want to let us off the hook because we do have work to do and the numbers speak for that disproportionality. But I do want to, make sure that message is clear that, again, the other transitional programs that we do have are just that, transitional programs, and so as kids work through them, they can get back into the gen ed setting. But it's just important to know that while not letting off the hook, we do a good job with multiple learners and getting them to the places they need to be. But we can always do a better job, and that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're going to find out from our equity plan, and kind of asking those different questions and continually pushing. I love the heat of that question. I love the heat from the community as well to make sure that we're doing the right things and continuing this work.
You have to be congratulated and given a lot of credit for putting women in leadership positions in this district, because as we all know, women for long historic times were just classroom teachers, and administrators were men, and now we see women jumping there and leading with their vision and their leadership and their kindness and big hearts. And that adds a lot to the success of our programs here and our plans here. Mr. Butchway, personal question. You are one of the leaders of our city here. I mean, definitely you are one of the people that are pioneers in more than education programs. You, as a city council member, you cover a lot of things. How do you balance all that with your major tasks in the
Yeah, well,
district?
Google Calendar works, and so I'm always looking at my phone to make sure I'm going to the right meeting or going to the right place. But I'll be honest with you. Beyond that, I have tremendous people in my life, not only from the council setting, but also at the school district. If I thought this was, or if anybody thinks this is a one-man show, or the changes that are being made in a good way, I don't want to take any responsibility for the bad changes, right. But anybody feels like they're because of me, it's because of a team effort, and that's what I can consistently kind of go back to, and float ideas from the team, talk about different things with the team, and I think it's really important to look at it from that standpoint. But also the team I have at home. I have a new son. I have a new partner, she's not a new partner, she's an old partner, but new in the sense of, she's taking on some new responsibilities. I've done these different things, and a lot of kudos goes to her, just making sure that, I can make the transitions without having to worry about different things, but also just make the transitions knowing that I have her support at all times, and so that's been amazing as well.
We are so delighted to have you here, Kingsley Butchway.
Thank you.
You are one of the rising stars of this district, and we have high hopes that you are among the people of the leadership. And we can see already your achievements in the city and in the district. On behalf of John Karhoff, who, by the way, is our cameraman today, okay. And he is the creator of this program some 20 years ago. When he was 15. And we have Mr. Mike Peterson directing this. And of course, we are in the headquarters of Public Access TV, and we would like you to come again.
We'll do.
Promise.
We'll do.
Another update, and we'll find more achievements and Definitely. More success and more blessing.
Definitely, definitely.
Thank you, sir, so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. And
ladies and gentlemen, we'll say goodbye to you and enjoy the good weather of October in Iowa City. We are the only place that has good weather. We have sun rising. We are still in the summertime.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a very good night. Bye.